Welcome to Season 4, Episode 9 of the Outlap F1 podcast, part of the Ship It Studio podcasting network. You've got your host here, John, and my buddy Andy here tonight. Deanna and James James is hopefully on a beach, drinking a cocktail, celebrating his birthday, and enjoying some time off. I know Deanna's working on some other things tonight. So you got Andy and I, but Andy, how's it going tonight?
I'm doing good, but I mean, my gosh, what an event. Talk about all of the emotions into one weekend, but I'm pretty sure that pretty much sums it up, but wow.
Yeah, very well said. It was an eventful weekend on and off the track, which we'll get into later. But yeah, before we get started tonight, just a quick reminder, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and yes, YouTube at Outlap F1 Podcast. Definitely see the link tree links on our Twitter page if you want to. If you're watching this on Apple, or if you're listening to this on Apple or Spotify or watching on YouTube, definitely do us a solid if you don't mind. Click that like button, subscribe button, give us a 5-star review. It means the world to us, really helps us get out into the algorithms and help spread the word. So if you like the show, if you don't mind, do us a solid. It helps spread the word via those platforms. It really makes a big difference. Obviously, you can email us at chatnow@outlapf1.com. We have a beautiful website that James has the keys of now, and it's still working, so we're in good shape. So www.outlapf1.com.
It has not crashed yet.
We're in good hands so far. If you're new to F1 and this was one of your first or second races and you're tuning in and you found us, first off, welcome. Appreciate being part of the Outlap F1 Nation. We have an F1 for Beginners episode, which we go through all the soup to nuts of everything F1. We try to break all the technical terms down into beginner's knowledge and beginner level things, so you can start growing and just start having some things you can listen into for the upcoming race weekends, just to give you a better understanding of what's going on and how the engines work, and really breaking it down for you. So that's Season 4, Season 4, Episode 4. And then on YouTube, if you're a visual learner, we have got a whole series. It's 3-part series on YouTube, but that we took time to add in a bunch of pictures and some diagrams, things like that, to really break it down for you. So definitely check that out for sure. Obviously, we mentioned Deanna. Unfortunately, she's not here tonight, but definitely check out her stuff at Relapse over on YouTube. She's got her Saudi Arabia. The live race reaction is out now. And I think she might be working on her condensed version like you normally see with all the cool graphics and stuff like that, probably right now. So that should be coming, I would assume, in the next few hours, probably before we even finish recording this one tonight. And Andy, Outlap F1, I'll be stepping up. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, the nation. And if you would like to join such distinguished people as Cody Walsh, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Richard Cole, Travis Colby, Timothy Brown, Hillary LaRose, Mary Brown, Jonathan Scott, and of course, Matt Polanski from the Red Sector MotoGP podcast. Please do check out our Support the Pod page or our support link that we put in all our show notes. We've tried to make new enhancements to the show. We try to keep them coming. I've put some new stuff into the soundboard tonight, so hopefully you guys will enjoy that. And but yeah, anything that we do get in terms of that does go right back into the show, try to make the show better, and we appreciate everybody that continues to donate. And if you'd love to, we'd definitely be super grateful if you wanted to consider donating.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. Definitely check out the link in the show notes or in the link tree if you have any interest in donating. I mean, it's all about just helping the sport grow. In the U.S. is especially, and most of our supporters are from the U.S., but it's really taken off here, and obviously it's been amazing to be a part of that. We're 4 seasons in now. And I definitely feel like we've had a contributing factor for sure. We're maybe not quite as big as Drive to Survive, but I feel like we've definitely have done our part, and we'll continue to do our part to kind of spread the sport, the news of the sport we love across this great nation and certainly across the world for sure. So lastly, we've got continue our partnership with Manscaped. They have phenomenal men's grooming products, from your shaving needs to shower gels and stuff to make you smell good and all kinds of good stuff that'll make your significant other quite happy. So definitely check them out at manscaped.com. You can get 20% off plus free shipping with our code OUTLAP, OUTLAP, one word. So definitely check them out. Andy, moving into the headline of the day. Kick it off for us, buddy.
Well, I have kind of two. One is like if I just wanted to talk about the race, and one if I want to talk about the venue. So my one about the race is A quote from the Hunger Games: moves, and more importantly, counter moves, because that's how you go racing in 2022. And then my headline about the venue is, I've never seen a venue deliver such a great show, and we got a little bit of everything today. And I have in my heart absolutely, positively zero desire to ever see F1 go back to that track.
Yeah, very true. It's kind of hard for me to come up with my own after that one. It's kind of hard to follow that one, Andy. And that was a 2, right? You got any more?
Yeah, it was a 2-parter.
Yeah, I'm the same way as. Phenomenal racing. We had just insanity last year at this track. We had it again this year. Again, I think I said this last year, actually. If you take this track, you pick it up and you stick it somewhere that doesn't suck, this would be a phenomenal place to go for a long period of time. Sounds like we may be going back here for a while. We'll talk about that in a minute. But, so obviously we had a lot of things that transpired. We'll get into the race in a second. But, we on the show, we try to stick to things pretty straightforward and onto the race. We try to stay clear of the political things and things like that. With the sports podcast, we would let you make your own decisions outside of that. But unfortunately, there are some times when, geopolitical actions kind of force their way into the F1 and certainly into the show. So we do have to, I think, at least address the elephant in the room, and that being the events of Friday. So, Annie, we were supposed to have a guest on the night that we've had a few times, Vincenzo Landino. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it, just some family stuff tonight. I know we've got some audio from him that he sent us in. We want to make sure we get his thoughts on a couple of things tonight, so we're going to have those in. But, Andy, before we get to that, you want to kind of set the scene for what Friday happened and just the entire cluster that came with that?
Yeah, so most of the significant events all happened during Free Practice 1, which is still going on in the daylight. So FP2 is generally happening at night. All of a sudden, with about, I'd say, 15 minutes or so to go on the clock, all of a sudden you could see this plume of black smoke in some of the shots. There's a perfectly good shot of, smoke coming up, and wasn't really sure as to what was going on. And as it turned out, there was now a confirmed terrorist attack on in a Aramco oil refinery. So they blew up one of the oil refining tanks. And of course, that does what oil does, which is generate a huge plume of black, thick smoke. So you could see it. It happened about maybe 12 kilometers away from the circuit. That's disconcerting. We've talked on this show before about the fun of what comes with going to Saudi Arabia anyway. We've seen it happen in a Formula E race last year. Sometimes I would joke about seeing the drones and everything. There's nothing funny about what was going on Friday. So what ended up happening was Free Practice 2 was delayed by 15 minutes for the FIA, the track promoter, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, to basically address all of the teams, tell them what they knew, at which point then FP2 continued as normal. F2, which was also there, did not get any disruptions. They did their qualifying in between FP1 and F1, FP2. After FP2 happens, the team principals all got together. They agreed unanimously to keep the teams there and to continue with the weekend. And then the drivers had a meeting. And that meeting kept going and going and going until, I think, approximately 2 a.m. local time. There were reporters who had left that had to come back to find out what was going on. There was a lot of I would say disjointed messaging coming out of that meeting. A lot of the drivers, I don't think, were very comfortable continuing with the weekend. They were ultimately persuaded, either from their team principals or each other or with meetings with the FIA, to ultimately continue the weekend. So the weekend did continue to go ahead, but it was an extraordinary night. You rarely see F1 drivers as a group pretty much all kind of stand up and say, hey, at least listen here, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem. That message was at least delivered. An extraordinary night on Friday night. We weren't necessarily sure what we were going to get on Saturday, but the rest of the weekend did continue to go on ahead. To my knowledge, at least as we're recording tonight, there have been no other incidents reported at the track. So we were able to get, obviously, the event in, but just extraordinary events on Friday.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it certainly wasn't coincidental, the target that was selected. One, the location, and two, the company being a huge
Correct.
sponsor on both the F1 side and the Aston Martin side. So, yeah, certainly. I mean, thank God it was an attack on infrastructure and not people. Obviously it could have been worse, but certainly the timing and location and target were not coincidental in any stretch of the imagination. So, yeah, I mean, you mentioned Formula E. Obviously, last year, we had the attack literally, I guess, as the race was concluding, in its final moments. And thankfully that one was intercepted. I guess, they had, a defense system on place at the track that was able to intercept that. Unfortunately, the fireworks in the sky that night were not planned and were not intentional. So pretty scary things. And, we talked about on the show after that, like, surely F1 would never go here, right? After this. I mean, at that point, the track wasn't even remotely.
We were wrong.
Yeah, we were very wrong. Because at that point, the track wasn't even remotely close to being finished. It looked like it wasn't going to get finished. And then you add in, oh, by the way, we can't even guarantee our safety here. And it's bad enough, like we talk about, like Brazil and things like that, where you have, drivers and teams and media people being held up at gunpoint. This is taking it even to a whole other level when you're talking about drone and missile strikes, going on. So, yeah, we were clearly wrong because now we've been here twice. Last year went off without a hitch, thankfully, minus, the track not being sorted until the final wee hours of the morning prior to the race. But, yeah, I'm pretty shocked that the weekend continued. I take that back. In one way, I'm shocked, but also, and I'm probably like you, Andy, as someone who's watched the sport for nearly 2 decades, I'm also not shocked at all. So if that makes sense, if this was any other venue, any other sporting event, I would probably would truly be shocked. But given this is F1 and given, this is a cash game and a money game, and it's the only reason we're even there is because it's a cash game and a money game, that's sort of the part that I'm not entirely shocked. But I don't know, Andy, you want to go ahead and play our piece from Vincenzo?
Yeah, I mean, we'll play Vincenzo's take on all of this, and then we'll come back and we'll get into it.
Something that I think was really important to pay attention to early on this weekend after the practices was, some of the geopolitical stuff going on in Saudi Arabia. We had this attack on a fuel depot, an Aramco fuel depot. Aramco is not only a sponsor of Formula One, they sponsor Aston Martin as well. And, the drivers had met. It sounded like the drivers did not want to race from a few articles I read and a few things that I gathered. But the race went on. They were given assurances from the government that there was nothing wrong. It was safe, which is great. And then the BBC dropped an article that said that essentially one of the pieces of information the drivers were given was, you're going to have a very hard time leaving the country if you don't race. Is that a veiled threat? How accurate was that information? I don't know. But just to read that in print, with a major publisher it's kind of harrowing. If you're a driver or if you are on a team or if you're just involved in the sport at all, like, is that, like, are you risking your life to be at this track for this race weekend? And Formula One's always kind of raced in areas where things have been going on politically that we may not agree with, right, or are not right, and yet they race there. So is this any different? No. Is it right? No. Will they continue to race there? Probably, because it doesn't seem like their strategy is to go away from those types of things. I'm genuinely curious to see if there's a question now about Saudi Arabia and will they continue to choose to race there. Here's the thing: a lot of folks I've read on Twitter and across the internet have said we should have never been racing here in the first place, Why are we even racing here? Hopefully we never race here again. So a lot of the consensus is that we shouldn't be racing here. But Liberty One, Formula One, they're making different decisions. And their decisions are based on business decisions. It's money. And so to say that it's not money related would be false, I think. There's contracts, and Saudi Arabia has, I believe, a 10-year contract. So that's going to definitely come into play. So we'll see. This will be an interesting story to follow along. You notice we didn't hear much about it after the situation happened. Like, we heard nothing on Saturday and then Sunday. After this was a huge deal on Friday evening. And there's probably reasons for that. But once they leave, I wonder if we'll hear some more about it. So I want to stay tuned to that story for the rest of the week for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Vincenzo. We had originally planned to have him on this week just to kind of be our resident Ferrari fans. We knew James to be out. Like I said, unfortunately, had a last minute family engagement and wasn't able to attend tonight. But I appreciate you sending that in. I mean, from one of his specialties is obviously on the marketing side of things. And I felt, he and I were talking earlier tonight, and I wanted to get his thoughts on just the whole marketing piece and why we're even there to begin with. And, and he's got some, another piece later on about Ferrari. But, going back to kind of what he said, Andy, cash is king. I know LewisHamilton said that as well. I've read 55 million per year. I've read 90 million per year. I don't know what the actual, true number is there, but yeah, the reason we're coming here is because Liberty Media is getting paid a crap ton of money, to bring the circus to town to Saudi Arabia. But, I mean, yeah, it's just a shame. And you and I were talking pre-race. It looks like this was supposed to be a relatively short deal before we moved into a more permanent facility. What city is that in? Do you recall?
Are you going to make me say it now? Kedaya.
Kedaya? I figured you'd have a better chance of pronouncing it than I would. But now it looks like we may, based on some reports that we've seen coming out this weekend, it looks like, so yeah, this was supposed to be a temporary facility from day one. It is a street circuit, although we've questioned, even on our preview, we questioned the validity of that. They might let a handful of cars, maybe the royal family, the Saudi royal family gets to drive around in their street cars, and therefore we call it a street circuit.
I guess the Pirelli hot laps count.
Yeah, because it doesn't have a roll cage, maybe, so it's fine. I don't know. But it's looking like now, 2 years ago or whatever it was, Liberty Media and the FIA signed a 15-year deal to race in Saudi Arabia. And, again, the Formula E incident happened before we came here the first time. That would have been a very prime and obvious opportunity to step out of that situation and say, listen, similar to, the events, unfortunately, that are transpiring in, with Europe and Russia right now, you look at it and you say, okay, this is not good for business. It's not a good look. There's some really terrible things that are happening, that your country's involved in. And, yes, we have this contract, but here's XYZ loopholes, that we have in place that allow us to step out of this contract. That would have been a prime opportunity for them to exercise those rights. They chose not to. Again, last year was fine, but with a 15-year deal going on, and now it sounds like we might be sticking around in Jeddah for potentially up to 5 years, we're hearing now, before we move on to Qadiyah. I'm sure we're butchering that name. Apologies. But, Andy, if you're a betting man, what do you put on the odds of us pulling out of this contract?
Almost slim to none. They've already basically come out and said, if there was a piece on in the pre-race buildup, Stefano Domenicali actually went on Sky and was asked those exact same questions. And his response was something along the lines of, well, we want to bring it to a culture. We want to try to help modernize this part of the world. It is a part of the world that probably could use some modernization, in all honesty. But, still, it's just, there's not a good look. There's no way. Once you've gone here, there's no way to make it look good and feel good at the same time. It's either going to be a dazzling experience and we just all swallow really hard, or we pull out and we just agreed to shut this part of the world off from Formula One, at least. But it's not just Formula One. You got to remember that. There's Formula E that races here. The Dakar was held in Saudi Arabia this year. Extreme E had its first event in the desert of Saudi Arabia this year too. So it's a lot of different places. The Saudi government wants to be seen on the world stage as a major player. And this comes, it is the two sides of the coin. If they want to bring themselves into the modern world, well, then they have to be a participant in the modern world. And that means keeping everybody safe. And if they can't do that, that's a major, major problem. I'm just grateful that it looked like we got through the rest of this weekend without any other problems. I am sure there's going to be some stories told amongst the paddock, and things will come out after the rest of this weekend. So I agree with Vincenzo. Watch your sources and people being able to talk once they get out of that country.
Yeah, I have a feeling there's going to be some anonymous sources leaking some news here. Yeah, I mean, I know that, like we were talking earlier, Chris Medlin, one of the few FIA reporters that you and I really, really follow and trust with this information. Mm-hmm. I know that he had some opposing opinions based on his sources about this messaging that they won't be able to get out. And, he
basically came out and debunked that part of it. It was spun, and I don't know if spun is the right word, but it was framed as, well, we're already here. And if we tried to leave now, you wouldn't probably be able to leave until we were scheduled to leave on Sunday anyway. Being a logistics issue, not necessarily not being able to get out of the country, but not being able to get out of the country immediately. So, and that is true because actually, as Sky was going off the air this afternoon, they all said, well, we'd love to stick around for the team photo, but there's only one plane that's leaving, and we need to be on it. So we're going to wrap up here, ta-ta, and see you in Melbourne. So there is some validity to that. There's not a lot of air traffic going in and out of I think it's Riyadh is where they all fly in and out of. So there is a logistical circus that has to be coordinated. And if you try to move things up by just a couple days, that's 20 teams that have their schedules completely screwed up.
Yeah, it's one of those situations like there's probably a couple of different ways you could spin this. I'll use the word you use, framed. You could say, okay, they're saying we can't leave. I think WWE a few years ago was kind of kept there for a little bit, right, after a show in Saudi Arabia. So certainly that plays into the framing of that side of the story. But on the other side, yes, maybe I know Sky Germany said, screw it, we're out Friday night or Saturday morning. They split, and I personally don't blame them for that. But it's not just the Sky guys. It's not just, the drivers and Toto and Christian and company. You've got hundreds of staff members that, for one, you can't just leave all that, freight there. I mean, you got hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment that these teams own that they need. Now, yes, if this was an ongoing threat and then yes, they would say, F it, we'll do the insurance claim on it. We'll get it later. Yeah, they would prioritize, personnel safety. I'm sure that if in the event of an imminent threat. But you also don't want to be seen as, well, Lewis Hamilton and Max and all these guys are getting on a plane and piecing out, but then they've left hundreds of men and women, back here cleaning up stuff, and they got all these all the motorhomes and everything, all have to be put back together and get on, packed up and then transported to cargo ships and everything else. It was kind of a bad look regardless of which way it happened. So, I get, and like I said, that story could be framed in a variety of different ways. So I know we'll all be curious to see, and depending on how it's spun and what comes out of it, it's certainly something we'll talk about. Like I said, we try to stay clear of political things on this show. We are firm believers that you have the right to believe what you want to believe, and that's what makes us all special. Is we all have our own unique thoughts and feelings, and So we try to we don't try to sway people in one way or the other on this show. So we'll certainly cover it, just depending on, and we'll kind of see what comes out of it once kind of the dust settles for sure. But anyway, so yeah.
I mean, I think the only thing that came out of that drivers' meeting was I think Bottas said to one of the reporters or anything that they are going to try to take a look at the viability of this event, at least moving forward. Now, what that means or how that is going to play out, we don't know yet. So, you asked me point blank, do I think we're going to probably be back next year? More than likely, yes. I think that's the sad reality of once we've opened this Pandora's box, I think we have to kind of play in it, unfortunately. And I think that's how that's going to go. Yeah, and
it's a shame, too, that every time that a major sporting event goes into a country like Saudi Arabia, there's always that phrase that they tell us, like, that we want to help modernize that part of the world and yada yada. It's a shame that that's, I don't know if that, because we all know it's about money. Whether it's events going on where the Olympics go and things like that. We see them building up these massive structures, and then they're just left abandoned, and they're moving people out of the areas and displacing people. There's just a lot of other things. It really is about cash. And I would agree with you. If I had to put money down on it right now, I would say 100% we're coming back there next year, unless things spiral in a dramatic fashion within that country. And then, that could certainly change things. But without that, I'd be shocked to see us change anything. But any last pieces on that, Andy? Like I said, we're going to continue to cover, but just any last thoughts before we move on to what we're actually here to talk about this weekend?
No, I think we pretty much have got it kind of wrapped up. So I'm just going to go ahead. So Friday happens. We actually did get a Saturday, and then we did actually get a fairly entertaining and actually very entertaining Sunday. So we will start, as I am apt to do, with the qualifying recap and going out.
Wait, do you have to? Can we just skip this part? It's not pretty for me.
Oh, well, I had to live in it last week, so I tell you what I see.
Yeah, I'll lick my wounds after.
I understand it. But going out in Q1, before even setting a time, and boy, did this guy have a really, really awful weekend, that would be one Yuki Sonoda. So he did not start the qualifying and therefore did not have a classification. P19 was Nicholas Latifi. P18, Nico Hulkenberg. P17, Alex Albon. In P16, with what had to be the surprise of the day, that would be Lewis Hamilton going out in Q1, I think for the first time since 2017.
First time since 2017. The first time on pace, that wasn't mechanical or some freak change in weather since 2009.
Yeah.
13 years that he's been knocked in a Q1 based on pace.
So advancing through to Q2, but going no further, in P15 was Lance Stroll. P14, Mick Schumacher, who we will talk about in just a second. P13 was Joe Granu. P12 was Daniel Ricciardo, although he was later given a 3-place grid penalty for impeding one Esteban Ocon. P11 was Lando Norris. P10 was Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, making Q3 for the second straight week. P9, Pierre Gasly. P8, Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. P7, Fernando Alonso. P6, George Russell. P5, Esteban Ocon. P4 was Max Verstappen, bit of a surprise there. P3, Carlos Sainz. P2, Charles Leclerc. And in P1, with a qualifying time of 1 minute 28.2, was Sergio Checo Perez in the Red Bull.
So we got a lot of storylines to talk about for quali, and I know we had an exciting race. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but a few different things. We'll start with the first one. Let's start with Hamilton. Let's just get it out of the way. Andy, what did you think about that? Before I give my Mercedes homer approach, what did you think of the car itself and just what your thoughts are on what was going on Saturday?
I mean, it still looks like they are struggling mightily with the bouncing. Definitely in the straight line. And again, as you've kind of seen, Mercedes power in general seems to be struggling in a straight line. I think most of the Mercedes powered cars were at the bottom of the speed trap graphics yet again. The highest qualifying Mercedes-powered car turns out to be Russell, and that's in P6. But then you got nobody else in Q3. So there definitely appears to be, this is, again, some correlative data here, something up with the Mercedes power unit. We don't necessarily know what, but it definitely looks like they're down on power compared at least to their rivals. So that's one. And then two, I mean, according to what Toto Wolff said, they went with some sort of a setup or some sort of radical setup on Lewis's car, and he could not get any grip. The tires were not firing up. And when you've got the bouncing problem and you've got tire warm issues on a track where you got to have that tire temperature right when you hit that, when you go from jump, that's a problem. And I think that's what led to the result.
Yeah. So first off, Andy, on the power side of things, if they're truly down on power, which it certainly looks like you are, because you're right. I mean, outside of Russell, there wasn't a single other Mercedes power car that qualified in the top 10. If that's the case, and how with the engine freeze and everything else coming on, is, you know, what's Mercedes' options here? Do they have any hope of I mean, granted, they could maybe turn things up. I don't know if they're worried about reliability, and I know Toto said that they had a little bit more in this motor, so I just don't know if they're not pushing it because they're worried about a failure. But with the engine freeze and everything else that's happening, you know, what is the rest of this year? What does the next couple of years look like if you're a Mercedes powered car right now?
Yeah, I think that's a bit of an unknown. I mean, we're into the realm of the unknown if you really think about it. I mean, in the past, you would say, okay, well, when's the next spec going to come out? Well, I don't know when the next spec is going to come out or if it's available, but I would assume if it's some sort, the rumor is it's something to do with this new fuel, the biofuel and the additive that's in there, and that's somehow making the engine at least less efficient. And if that's the case, that is something they can rectify. They can learn how to burn the fuel a little bit better. And maybe it's a moding thing that they don't want to, like you said, that they don't want to necessarily turn it up for fear of reliability. This weekend was a perfect example of reliability seemed to strike every manufacturer, as we're going to talk about. So they are running these engines and the Aero pretty much on the limit, and we're still so early in our development and understanding as to how these cars are going to make lap time. Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure. It just this is a much different track to Bahrain. I was interested to see was it just a Bahrain thing or was it better here? I think all the Mercedes cars looked better. Certainly, my McLaren team looked better here, but it wasn't like they're not suddenly back to being the fourth fastest team, by any stretch. So it's a tough. It's a tough thing. You know, I assume Mercedes are going to get on top of it. I'm sure they're going to run, you know, dyno time and have, you know, ways to figure it out. But in the meantime, they have to figure it out, and then they have to get it to the customers.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, too. It's like when you look at Q1 times, Hamilton was, let's see, you know, what, 3/4 of a second off the pace. They said that maybe, well, actually, no, sorry, more than that, if I'm looking at just Q1 time. So almost 2 seconds off. So at one point they said that he was losing approximately a second just on the straights alone. And going back and watching his onboard of each and every one of his runs in Q1, that car, not only is it slow on the straights, but the balance of the car. And I know that they apparently found a little bit of something that worked on the hard tire come Sunday, but every single corner he's having to do this, he's stalling at the wheel. To pull in the NASCAR, stalling at the wheel. The car just will not go. You know, there is no. You look at Max and it's just point and shoot. Lewis is point. Come on, rotate. So you add that, you add the slow horsepower, and then you add the porpoising issues, which seem to be not as bad. Just granted that it's a newer service track, you know, for the Mercedes as a whole. But yeah, they've got issues. All right, so that's Hamilton. Next thing, obviously, Schumacher. Well, thank God that he's all right. I mean, that was the big thing. I saw it on delay, and I was texting you guys as soon as I saw it. I was almost scared to look because I was like, all right, if anyone's going to tell me like what's going on and like ease my concerns without blasting on Google is Andy. So I'm like, let me just text Andy. before I go Google anything because I'm scared to look. But what a freaking hit! I mean, I saw potentially up to 70 Gs, 170 miles an hour. I mean, that was just a brutal shot.
It was a miss in a part of the track that the track designers did not expect there to be a lot of missing happening. And it looked like he got his right rear on one of the curbs, and the curb bit him, and he spun around, and he hits the outside retaining wall that did not have any safer barriers attached to it or any sort of soft walls. And then he comes across the track, and he hits the other inside retaining wall. The side pod got it directly. It looked incredibly scary. It was one of those that made me stop what I was doing and stop typing. I was trying to, keep up with the live tweet of qualifying, but it was big wreck, huge into the wall, instant red flag. And then they cut away in that manner that, they're not going to show the driver right away. And then they took this really, really wide shot of that. You could see the medical team there, but you couldn't see what was necessarily going on. And, kudos to at least the Sky team. David Croft, I think, did a wonderful job of trying to keep everybody informed the minute that he knew it. And thank God he's okay. And thank God for the halo, because I've seen a replay of it, and one of his tires comes up and would have probably got him in the head. It's really, really scary looking wreck. Fortunately, the best part of this all situation is Mick was fine. He was able to not walk away, but he was walking later that night. He's been taken to the hospital, treated, released. Haas decided preemptively on Saturday night not to run a second car, probably because they couldn't get one, even their backup monocoque and everything set up and balanced and to have any sort of real chance at running. And after a shot like that, just, call it a day. And I think that's what Haas elected to do. And I think they were right to do so.
Yeah, I also heard too, in addition to that, is there was fear, apparently, there was fear that if there was another wreck on Sunday, that they may have an issue with parts, getting enough parts and getting developed and built on time for Australia. So, all these teams are playing catch up, and obviously as you're developing stuff, and obviously they've hit on something because the car seems to have some pace on both sides of the garage. If you're changing things rapidly back at the shop, then yeah, I mean, granted it's only 2 weeks, but it's, we're talking Australia, it's a long freaking way out there. I'm sure things are well on their way already to Australia. But yeah, I mean, when they showed the wide shot and everything, my heart was like in my throat, basically. That was almost obviously very different forms of racing, but it was almost like a Dale Earnhardt type shunt of when it twists and you have what feels like almost like a 90-degree into the wall. That's when your heart just jumps. You and I have been around racing long enough to know, I feel like 99% of the time you and I can tell instantly, yeah, that's a big one, but he's fine. Or yeah, it's a big one. Oh God. And I feel like before that car even came to a stop, I was like, oh God, right. This is something.
Once he hit that inside wall, I was like, oh yeah. I think my exact reaction was, holy shit, that's a bad one.
Yeah, that was beyond frightening. And isn't it crazy too that ever since the Halos come out, I feel like we've had a bunch of incidents that if it weren't for the Halo would have been very, very serious. It's almost like, I don't know, we got that onto the car at the perfect time, and I don't know why it is or what's happening. But thank God it's there, because it just continues to prove its value time and time out.
Aesthetically, I don't even notice it anymore. I really, truly don't. And it's just, there's so many more benefit for it being there than not. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk still back and forth about Aeroscreen and Halo and Indy versus F1 and yada yada. But, at least on this occasion and on many occasions recently, that Halo has proved its worth a million times over. So thank God for that. I guess two other things real fast. Daniel Ricciardo, did you have any hope that he wasn't going to get a penalty? Because I feel like as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, that's going to be a 3-dropper.
No, as soon as they showed that, I went, that's probably fait accompli. I was hoping maybe, one of the McLaren cars might be able to tickle Q3, because that might at least say, okay, well, at least then he goes down, but at least he made it in, and maybe, somebody else wrecks or something else. They can, get a cheap spot up there. But Lando was closest, to Q3, probably should have made it. and just ran into traffic on his last qualifying attempt. But definitely from on the deck where they were last week, which was nowhere, and they couldn't explain it. And, that just made me even more irpy and nervous, and then everything else. They did not feel lost. They felt like they were in and competitive, and you could hear it in the team radio. The McLaren engineers sounded a lot better on both cars this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, Lando, I think only missed it by a thousandth of a second into Q3. So yeah, huge improvement for them. And we'll get into their pace. Australia is going to be certainly a totally different test for all these teams, and especially the McLarens and Mercedes that are struggling. We saw some improvement with high speed corners. Australia is going to have a little bit of a mix. We're going to see this new quote unquote layout, some of the new modified turns for the first time. I can't believe it's going to be 3 years since we've been there or actually raced there, but. That's going to be interesting to see. And then before we move on, just to the race, we'll probably take a quick break real fast. But Checo Perez, man, my
out of nowhere, it almost seemed out of nowhere.
Yeah,
just because I'm trying to keep up with the I had signs and I had Verstappen in my data sheet right in front of me. So I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, Leclerc's up and he's up, and now Verstappen's up, and now Sainz is up. And then all of a sudden, Perez jumps to P1. So right in the middle, I was not following his lap at all. And then it was just an amazing lap. And kudos on Checo for getting it done in prime time. And as it turned out, Red Bull really needed it because Verstappen could only manage fourth. So, first ever podium. That is the end of the first ever pole position. That's the end of the longest streak. It was 215 races. And it was, I think, today was his anniversary of his first race ever. It was to the day, cool. And he starts on the pole. So mega lap from Checo. Obviously, he's indicating that he's come to play this championship season as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping that this is a thing of good things to come for Checo. Last year, he was kind of used as a pawn for Red Bull, throughout the season, and he played the team game, to the T. He did everything he was asked for. But after seeing that blistering of a lap from Leclerc, I'm like, all right, Leclerc locked it up, another P1. And I wasn't paying any attention to Checo at all. So kudos to the kid. I think it's awesome to see. And I hope that I hope that the Red Bull side isn't all one-sided this year, and that he'll get a fighting chance for sure. But Andy, I know we took a while talking about some of the Friday events, things like that. I'd say let's take a quick break before we get into lights out. We'll be right back with you to cover all the 20 through 1, all the drama in between, and lots more to come. So stick tuned. Welcome back to Season 4, Episode 9 of the Outlet F1 podcast, breaking down the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Just got done talking about Friday and Saturday events, so let's move into the back markers and throw the green flag as we always do. We'll kind of go rapid fire on this just for time perspective, but MP20, a guy that's happy for this weekend to be over. Yeah, Yuki Sonoda, unfortunately did not even make it to the line. Andy, looks like a driveline issue. Anything more of that?
Stopped on his recon lap, told basically to hop out of the car. That was pretty much end of the day, so we did not see much from Yuki Sonoda. That was a bad pick for my fantasy team. Yeah. Out.
Well, at least you remembered to update yours, because I forgot again. After telling people to remember to do it, I forgot. It's been one of those weekends. P19, Nicholas Latifi, another guy that's happy to get out of Saudi Arabia from a racing standpoint. Obviously, a pretty big shunt on Saturday. A really awkward wreck on Saturday.
Yeah.
Marshall's running, all kinds of weird stuff. And then again on Sunday, loses the rear, smacks the wall, brings out the first safety car. Why did it take so long, in your opinion, Andy, for the safety car to come out? Because from what I saw, it looked like immediately there was no way in hell that they were getting that car out without some machinery. And it's already a skinny part of the track. I was really confused as to the whole timing of that situation.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is the new the new crew, still trying to figure out, when to fire everything. They did ultimately make the right decision. Obviously, as soon as Marshall's came on the track, it was an instant virtual safety car. And then it was converted into then a full safety car. So if that's maybe the way that we start that to at least slow everybody down and then, do the catch-up procedure, that's fine. But yeah, it seemed like it was double waved for probably longer than I would have anticipated. Maybe it was just the pictures didn't make it up to race control fast enough. I don't know. I can't really speculate as to what it was, but he wasn't in the firing line by any stretch, but there were marshals on track. So once that happens, I think then the automated systems kick in. So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't, it was just kind of the strange irony. Latifi causes yet another race to turn on its head, but, beyond that, not a good weekend for him or for Williams, really.
Yeah, and I know we had a question that came in about Latifi, trying to find that now.
This is from the formula.
Okay, so yeah, he said tough conversation, but and I genuinely like the guy, but is Latifi good enough to be in F1? And I feel like, I mean, the guy's got talent. I mean, certainly he can drive better than I can, and but it's a tough situation, and I feel like Williams is a tough situation. My buddy and I are watching the race today. We were talking about this as well. It's like one of those deals where, what's the phrase? Like, can't live with him, can't live without him, because you need the money that his family and father brings to your team. Certainly, yes, they have the Doralton Capital, and that's bringing a plethora of change to the bank account there. But you need that money, at least for the moment. But at the same time, yeah, he's tearing up equipment and looks lost. I mean, everyone who we thought wouldn't approve, we were looking at Haas and things like that, showed pace last week. And when we talk about Albon, like Albon's, yes, slow, but significantly, faster on pace than him. And that's talking about a guy that, had just kind of a weird off season, and, certainly has been away and not in a F1 seat time for a while. And he's already being handily beaten by this guy. So, and then you add in just tearing up equipment. It's just a bad situation. So, I mean, Andy, what do you think? I mean, about the situation?
I mean, Nicholas is a classic pay driver, and he's probably really the only really truly classic pay driver. I mean,
yeah, that we have left.
Maybe Joe Granu, but I think Joe's got a lot more talent than Nicholas does, or at least early on. At least that seems to be the indication. But it's kind of interesting. We talk about, we look at it from almost a talent level, and you can really only compare him against their teammate. But I think a lot of this comes down to, he's probably like on the periphery of where like he'd be like a high F2, low F1 type talent wise. But a lot of it comes down to confidence. What has he had since the end of last year to really build his confidence? I mean, right now the Williams looks to be really, really much a handful. Both he and Albon struggling with both reliability and pace. So, yeah, I don't know that it's entirely all his making. I do think he's a very nice pay driver. I think he's well mannered. I think he says the right things. Certainly we've seen what the opposite of that is, and we know that when we see it. But he's probably. I think if you were actually trying to rank the 20 best drivers in the world, I don't know that he'd be one of them at this point.
No, yeah, definitely not. Yeah, I mean, I would take him any day over that other asshole that I won't mention his name, who's no longer on the circuit.
We don't have to worry about it. That's the great part.
Yeah, but yeah, I may agree. When you've got talent in there and you've got guys sitting in the garage today, multiple ones that you look
sitting right next to Toto Wolff, by the way.
Yeah, you've got prime talent. We also had Giovinazzi was there this weekend.
What a nice, efficient hair bun! Yeah. What a wonderful hair bun on that dude.
Nice and tidy this weekend. But yeah, when you got guys like that, you got other guys obviously in Formula E and guys moving to IndyCar and things like that who have a plethora of talent. Obviously, K-Mac coming back, but certainly I wouldn't put him in the top 20, probably not in the top 30, drivers out there. So yes, can he drive better than me? Hell yeah, he can. But to putting in the top 20, top 30, I mean, without that bank account, he's long gone. So it's a difficult situation, but we'll see kind of how that transpires as Williams progresses, and hopefully for their sake as they continue to get deals. They got Duracell, obviously Dortmund Capital. They got some things brewing on the financial side. If they come to the point where they feel like they don't need that Latifi money anymore, then yeah, I think that they would cut ties quite quickly. But
they're probably content to let the contract just kind of run out. I think this is his last year on this deal.
I believe so, yes. I believe so.
I'm pretty sure that they're just going to play the long game and just let it expire and then just say thanks. We wish you well, but you're not here.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so P18, Daniel Ricciardo. I have to say, I had no idea that he pitted on lap 8. Did I miss this? I mean, I watched this race twice today, and I still don't. At one point,
the scoring pylon just all of a sudden had him at the back, and I'm like,
yeah,
what
he
happened?
was like P13, and then I look over a minute later, and he's P18. I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, did he get passed? Like, who? What?
At first, I thought it was maybe some sort of like a flat tire, or he maybe had a puncture or something like that. But no, that was strategy. They were kind of rolling the dice. What they were hoping was he had, going into this race, an extra set of hard tires. So if they were going to go possibly do a two-stopper where they started him on the mediums, they're going to run him as hard as they could. Don't forget, he also had a grid drop. So he starts P14. He had made it up to, I think, P12 when he pits. Then he goes to the back. And the undercut, or the long undercut, actually ended up kind of working out for him. He actually ended up in front of his teammate at the safety car. So it looked like strategy-wise it was going to start to come to him. At one point, both McLaren cars were running in the points. Starting to look like a really good day, and then Mr. Reliability kicked in and some sort of an engine failure. So whether it was overheating or it was not, what I know for sure, it was not an issue necessarily related to the brakes. It looked like he lost drive. It looked like, and could not continue to go forward. So he stops at a really, really bad spot for some other drivers, as it turned out, because that closed the pit lane. In the same minute that Fernando Alonso had some reliability issues, and that's P17. So, and this is different manufacturers suffering different reliability. So this track was a bit of a equipment killer today.
Yeah, for sure. Which is weird because it was warm, but it wasn't like insanely warm. But yeah, in the course of what I felt like a minute, we lost Daniel Ricciardo, Alonso, and Valtteri Bottas.
Yep.
All just bam, bam, bam. So yeah, we'll get into kind of, obviously that brought out the virtual safety car. We'll talk about that and how its impacts on some other drivers later. But was there any official word on what happened? I mean, it almost, when he talked about brakes, I almost thought, okay, did he lose like an NGUK or something like that? Like, I guess maybe time will tell later this week or something like that. We'll figure out.
Yeah, no, I think they want to get the engine back to the MTC and run a proper diagnostic on exactly what happened. And again, this would also put more bad news for Daniel Ricciardo now, having to go through an engine when you're really only supposed to use 3 for the entire year. So, not. And it kind of sucks because this was probably, I thought, his best weekend in a while. He was on it in practice. He was right on Lando's pace. Quali pace looked okay for him, at least at this point. It's obviously not where any of the fandom wants them to be yet, but there was progress. Yeah. And they were able to run Friday perfectly reliable. And until this pops up, I was just thinking, well, hey, at least they got through 2 whole race weekends and nothing popped up, but not to be.
Yeah, and this just goes to show you that 2 races in now, and every manufacturer has already had some type of significant issue within those manufacturing teams. So, yeah, reliability is certainly a gremlin. It seems like engine temps is a gremlin, which is not surprising, just given the new package and new cooling and things like that. Because moving on to Valtteri Bottas, looked really, really good again this week. The guy's like found his mojo all of a sudden, which we talked about. If you give him an opportunity,
seems to suit him.
Yeah, exactly. You build a car around his style, and he's showing great things with it. It had some really good battles there with kind of the self-inflicting, as I put it, Alpines. which we'll talk about here in a second. But unfortunately, it was certainly on pace for likely a P6, but then retired during that same sequence. He reported that the engine temps just continued to rise, and nothing they were doing was bringing the temps down. Clean air, pulling out, on the straights. Nothing was bringing those temps down. So certainly they have no idea why, at least at this point, as to why that's happening. But certainly they're going to have to look into that. Fernando Alonso, we kind of talk about him and Ocon real fast.
What is it with pink liveried cars and finding each other on a night circuit?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was having flashbacks to Singapore. What year was that? Like 20?
So was Otmar
18 or something. Yeah,
because I kept interviewing him in the middle of it.
I'm like, Ocon's already got a history of night races and teammates putting into walls and everything else. So, I mean, they lost so much time there, and like, I know we all want to see great racing and things like that, but there's also a side of me that says, like, dude, what the hell are you guys doing? Like,
right.
I mean, yes, thankfully they didn't hit each other. There was no contact. It was clean. And they both pretty much said the right things after the race about it being respectful and had a good time and reminded him karting and yada, yada. I think at least Fernando, was quite annoyed by this situation. That final kind of hurrah where he sort of just like, I think, did he run him wide or something in turn one? Was kind of just like all right, kid, like, get the hell off my ass. Like, let's get on. This. But I mean, it was the same way last week. They were like nose to tail for so much of that race. And then again, this week, and the whole time you're seeing this battle brewing, like, one shot, you don't see anyone behind him. Next thing you see Bottas right on their ass. And then next shot, you got K-Mag on all three of their asses. Right. Like, guys, what? And then Otmar is saying, listen, it'll settle down and yada. You'll wait and see. I'm like, well, no, it continued for a while. They lost so much time battling, just tearing up tires and everything else. I just don't get the mentality there. You want to see it, and if you're running for P1, sure, let them have at it. But that early in the race, like, simmer down and work together to work your way through the field.
I think the team, and I think both drivers were actually surprised, I think, by what we're seeing as the new developing style of how you race in 2022, that it's not just about the one move to make the overtake and then that's job done and we move on and focus forward and all that. No, you really still got to look in your mirror, because there's a counter move coming, either with DRS or with just genuine pace, because you can follow now the guy. So I think Alonso many times figured, well, that's move done, but Ocon's trying to make a name for himself. He's trying to do what he's being paid to do, and goes out and counter moves back on him several times. So, I mean, you saw it was a great show, but you were waiting for, okay, where's the schoolmaster, that comes on the radio and says that's enough. Yeah. And it wasn't until both Bottas and Magnussen were on top of them and making a farce of the whole situation that somebody finally came to their senses and said, all right, guys, knock it off. We got a race to run.
Yeah. Next thing you know, you're having to defend against another team. That's
not going to play nice.
If you're an Alpine fan, you got to be livid during watching this happening, because you can just see certainly you can see on the timing, but the camera shots were very telling of just how quickly how much ground they were losing up front and how quickly, Bottas and K-Mag were coming up behind them. It was just dumb. And, I want to talk about DRS and some of that later, and some of the counter moves. I want to talk about that later as we get into our front runners. But moving on in P14, in Alexander Albon, had a okay race overall until the end. Ended up having to retire after late contact with Stroll. Was awarded a 3-place grid penalty because he did. It technically was DNF, so that will be awarded at Australia in 2 weeks. When you saw the move, Andy, did you think? Did you put blame one way or the other, or what was you thinking?
I actually thought this was much more of a racing incident. It was two guys going for the same piece of tarmac, I thought it shuffled itself out because they both basically wrecked because of it. So, it didn't bother me at the time. I wasn't like, that deserves a penalty or anything like that. But, I mean, if you want to give one to set a precedent, again, this is a new regime in race control, and they're all trying to figure out where the lines are. And I guess if you want to set it there, fine.
Yeah. Watching Stroll's onboard, you can't see Albon's car at all. going back and watching Albon's car, it is a late move, and it's a ballsy move. I think what he got in trouble with, I feel like, is kind of what Max did last year and kind of got hit for it. It was one of those, like, you forced, like he hit the apex, but he was actually over the curb as well on the inside. So, there wasn't really a gap there. It was like enough to go for it, but also at the same time, not enough for a car to actually fit while staying on track. And I think that's the part that probably bit him. Went over the curb, was all squirrely, opposite the contact. I'm not surprised by the penalty because, you never want to see another car get taken out. You want aggressive racing, but at the same time, you got to be smart about it. So, it was probably a little bit of a ballsy move there, and definitely bit Lance Stroll, who finished P13. Again, had overall showing, just considering the pace of the Astons. Certainly an improvement over last week, but he lost out on the last VSC as well, on cars that had fresher tires, and he was trying to hold on there for some points, and that wasn't meant to be. And then obviously the late contact took him out. So unfortunate for them. Let's move into the midfield. P12. I would say a shock P12, just given everything that's happening. Nico Hülkenberg, only been back for a couple of weeks. Obviously, we didn't even talk about Sebastian Vettel, obviously out again this week. Of all the weeks to miss, I'm sure he wasn't hating the fact that he was not there, just given all the stupidity that happened.
Unable to produce a negative COVID test, and therefore unable to race. So the super sub Nico Hülkenberg was back in the car. Thought he actually, considering what they've asked him to do, I think he's done more than an admirable job. He was complaining that this track just was wrecking him, because I don't think he was expecting to be in the car for these first two races.
Yeah, I mean, they were kind of talking about on the broadcast as well. I mean, when you go from sitting on the couch, and granted, he's in phenomenal shape, but when you go from sitting on the couch to then being in the most demanding from a G-force perspective car on planet Earth, and on a track that you're going 180 miles an hour, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Not to mention, 205 down the straights and hard braking into a 90 left, right. I mean, you're wrecking your back, you're wrecking your neck, and you could be in a phenomenal shape, but if you're not in F1 shape, you're going to get tore up. And so the fact that he made it through this race, I know Russell said as well that this was probably the most physically demanding race that he'd ever been in, that he was just exhausted coming out of it. So you imagine a guy that hasn't been in a car for a long time, didn't do any preseason testing, probably wasn't, on an F1 regiment of strength training throughout any of the offseason. To finish P12 today is pretty damn phenomenal. I'll definitely for sure say that. And obviously, he could have been up there a little bit higher as well. Post safety car, they again were kind of screwed by the whole safety car timing of everything. And then he said he really struggled to get the tires up to temp, after that period of time, and fell back. Guanyu, who I'm gonna
Zhao Guanyu.
Yeah, I'm gonna butcher that name for the rest of the season, I feel like. Finished in P11. Horrible start right off the start. Anti-stall. He made contact with the Cardo, and then the car, I don't know if it tripped a sensor or what, but yeah.
It was hilarious because Crofty thought he was in a Haas. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's not right. It's just a red and white car. It's not a Haas.
Oh, yeah, that cracked me up. Later in the race, ended up getting a 5-second penalty for going off track and gaining an advantage. Did we see any footage of this during the race?
I think it was a turn one.
That's the only place that I could think of that you could gain an advantage without hitting something.
Right, where he didn't give it back. And because, again, we're in the new regime of the teams can kind of, in a relevant range of time, which we don't really know, can decide to give a position back. And then that kind of, that in lieu of a penalty, that works. He obviously didn't think he did anything wrong because he continued to go. I don't know if his team ever tried to convince him to give a position back, and if he didn't, but it didn't happen, so they assessed him a 5-second penalty. And then when he tried to come in to serve the penalty, the jackman screwed up. And you're not allowed to touch the car until the 5 seconds are up. Well, the jackman either forgot that there was a 5-second penalty or panicked and thought he missed it and then decided to jack the car up. So the car is now jacked up for the 5 seconds. The tires weren't changed. So the tire people did it right. But the stop had already started because guess what? You touched the car. So therefore, he didn't serve the 5-second penalty. And then he has to come back and do a drive-through. So considering all of that, and he finishes P11, the car definitely had some pace. The Alfa Romeo was definitely on it. We saw the issue with Bottas, was probably going to finish in the top 6 easy. So if you're an Alfa Romeo fan, you have to be very, very encouraged by what you're seeing from both your drivers at this point.
Yeah, I mean, his portion of the race was quite phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, the team had, like I said, had their issues. And turn 1 is rough because you see a lot of times throughout this weekend, we saw it last year as well, drivers blitzing their way through turn 1, just completely blowing it. And then it's kind of all subjective. Like, how much did you really gain? How much did you give up? Like, did you slow down? Because you rarely ever see anyone slow down after they come out of turn 1. So it's almost a matter of like, you're right on fine margins there about, what's an advantage or not. I didn't see anything of it. I didn't hear any radio broadcasting of it before then. We didn't hear anything. I don't think we even heard, like, when they told him he had the 5-second, we didn't hear like an argument. We didn't hear any of that, which is surprising. But yeah, I agree with you. To come back and finish P11, phenomenal. You got to be thrilled if you're an Alfa Romeo fan, just because considering where you were, last year. Moving into our top 10, this one, I guess, painful, but not as painful as I thought it could be. P10, Lewis Hamilton. I will say a nice recovery just based on how garbage that car was on Saturday. He had actually some pretty good pace on that first stint, was running lap times right there, same realm with Russell, sticking with Russell, making some great moves, made his way up through the field. Unfortunately, he was also bit by the VSC situation. You hear him, he sees, I think it's Daniel Ricciardo, I think he sees first, and radios in, slow car on the front straight. Then there's like a quick delay, and that delay is what killed them.
Yep.
They say, okay, all right, box. And, at that point, he's straight. He's just missed, any chance of coming in. And then, like you mentioned earlier, shortly thereafter, pit lanes closed, and he circles, 2 or 3 more times, and just, there was never an opportunity for him to come back in until after the VSC ended. Given all that, though, I mean, had he come in there, he probably would have been somewhere around that like P6 range, how everything shook out. I think that would have been a hell of a nice recovery drive. But, considering just how garbage that car was, to come back and even get a point, I'll take it honestly this weekend. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna call out, if you're one of those people that have said that, based on the last 48 hours that Lewis Hamilton is garbage and that he's only fast because of his car, yada yada, you need some education. That's all. We're talking about a guy who's won a race every single year of his career. He was on the podium again last week, and yeah, he had good cars in 7 and 8, or 07, 08, but 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 had fairly shit cars and still managed a race winning. They obviously got the setup wrong on Saturday, and that car obviously has some issues overall. But if you're going to take this one race weekend and say Lewis Hamilton is garbage, then you need to go back and watch some racing.
That's a very short-sighted view, and that's full of recency bias. Would be my opinion of that type of take. He was dragging that car possibly to a P5 before all of that, the VSC issue happened. And he was almost going to luck back into a really good finish because the VSC hit right when he would have needed it to. Yeah. Cause he was he was the last car to not make a first pit stop. So, I had thought, he did carve his way through the field. I think he got some help from a lot of players that kind of said that they didn't think that really Lewis was his race. But you still had to pull off those moves, and he still managed to do that in not a car that is to his liking yet. So there's definitely plenty of innate talent there. I still say the best I've ever seen is the years that he didn't win the championship. But that argument to me is a moot point and dead on a doornail before it even gets anywhere. But I mean, they are definitely struggling. We talked about it in terms of qualifying. Race day was better, and if that's a recovery drive, fine. I mean, I think he gets out of there. He gets a point, and Toto Wolff has acknowledged they have work to do on that car, and they're gonna have to put their heads down and figure it out.
Yeah, and if you're a Mercedes fan like myself, I guess the only saving grace is you got 2 weeks before Australia, and granted, pretty much all those parts are on their way, but who knows? Maybe you get some kind of special thing in the mail. Overnight postage down to the lane down under. That maybe helps you out.
At least it's a chance to get back to the factory and really regroup. You really didn't have that with this quick turnaround.
Yeah, and then you kind of settle in for a little bit. So, of all the years for it to kind of start a little bit light, granted we've had back-to-back races, but the overall start of the season is relatively light in this first kind of quarter of races. It's probably a good year for them to happen. They can start kind of see and start really analyzing the data. So, I think it was a great recovery drive. I agree with you. In those years where the car was just completely garbage, 09, McLarens and things like that. I mean, to see, people give credit to Max about driving above the car's weight. Well, he's done that year in and year out, in years of his career as well. So, yeah, you haven't seen the last of LewisHamilton. Don't for the Mercedes fans, don't freak out, and for the haters, go educate yourself. Go watch some races, please.
Wins a race in 2013 in a car that was the 5th fastest on the grid. So, I mean, he's not done. He's not finished. I don't know that he's got extreme confidence in the car, and I do think that is something that does show in lap times and everything else. Is when you are confident. I mean, look at the Ferraris. I mean, when you are confident and you can push when you want to push and conserve when you want to conserve and do what you want to do when you want to do it, it looks easy. Exactly.
Well, and you see what he did last year at this race. And he knew that, all right, if I throw it into this corner, I'm going to come out the other end because the car is going to I'm going to make this car do what I want it to do. And it's going to come with me. It's going to, it'll follow through with me. This year's car is, like I said, he's stalling at the wheel. No one's going to be fast if you're stalling at the wheel. So I'll take a recovery drive at this. And yeah, you're right. He was on pace for P5, P6. And if he hits that, if they tell him to box, 3 seconds earlier, he's probably in a top 5, top 6 finish today. So we'll take it to that. Moving on, next place, K-Mag, Kevin Maxson in 9th. Andy, what did you think about his day? Haas's definitely seems like they're back overall.
Very impressed with the qualifying pace. I thought kind of their race runs, at least on Friday, were kind of not all the way back to where we thought they were going to be, but this is kind of where we really thought they really were. Maybe the 7th or 8th quickest car. But well done for K-Mag, probably squeezing everything out that he could have from this weekend. The Ferrari power unit is definitely working out. It looks like the aero is interesting, and it's a unique car, and it has, I guess, a very unique cooling system that is working for them right now. So, again, for another guy who was sitting on a couch for 2 weeks, he looked pretty knackered at the end of the race today. It's looking up. Now they go to Australia, which is like, okay, do we exercise the Haas demons finally? Because they've proven that they can run well there. So I think if you're a Haas fan, there's a lot of potential. And what can they get really out of this season? It was also interesting in the post race. Gunther Steiner gave us, and you might not have heard it, but Chris Medland was giving an interview, and Gunther Steiner said this air quote, and I'm going to put it out here, and it will be explicit. He literally said he would have fucked the entire grid to get 2 points out of last year's car. That was Gunther for you.
Oh, I love Gunther so much. He's just quickly becoming one of my favorite people in the world. I mean, he said afterward in like the post stuff that he said spirits are high here. We cannot wait to get to Melbourne and hopefully score some more points. Hopefully with both cars. like you said here, they've had great success at Australia. They've had some unfortunate issues at Australia. So yeah, it's a track that they know well. It's a track that has suited them well in the past. So would love to see them steal some double points. That would be phenomenal in a couple of weeks. Moving into PA, Pierre Gasly. He pitted just prior to the safety car. Definitely got screwed there. Was also, again, definitely the front runner for that team. He mentioned at the end of the race he was feeling actually quite ill, and I think he was having some stomach issues, stomach pains. But he said he was absolutely thrilled with the car. Granted, if he pits, 30, if he pits the next lap, he's fine. But he pitted right before the safety car came out. Obviously, that hurt him dearly. But again, nice recovery to P8 and kind of made up for that issues. But any other thoughts on Pierre?
No, just that, at least for this AlphaTauri, it ran reliably. I think we're seeing some patterns, and that is I think at least early, the only thing that's really holding that team back is reliability right now, because both he and Sonoda have shown some really, really nice pace in the early part of this season. It's just, can they get the cars to the end of the race? Yeah, I mean, for a car that we thought was not all that well going into this season, they've cured their ills, at least pace-wise, very, very quickly.
Yeah. P7, you're wearing the hat tonight, Andy. How happy are you with a P7?
I'll take it, man. It was almost the return of last lap Lando. He raced Esteban to the line at the end there. It was actually, Lando tried to be 2 laps from the end, Lando, and that proved to kind of be the undoing, because he got past Ocon, and I'm like, all right, he did it. But then, like we talked about before, moves and counter moves.
Yeah.
The counter move, Ocon was able to come back at him the next time through the DRS zone, was able to overtake. Lando was basically, had he had another lap, he probably pulls it off, but not to be. But good to see McLaren back into the points. This is they're off the schneid. They score points. Like I said before when we were talking about just Ricardo, the team as a whole, it felt better. Much more engaged on the radio, not feeling so lost. So if that was level 0 was Bahrain, at least we've moved beyond level 0. So yeah. Not where they want to be, but at least moving forward. And I do know they didn't really have a whole lot of upgrades here. So this was the same car that they ran last week. Now they can actually start to probably, if they've got that brake issue finally licked, and it sounds like they sort of at least have enough of a solution to where they're fine with it, they can move into some other performance issues, which they still need to do.
It's going to be interesting. I don't know what the weather's going to look like in Melbourne, but that could be a track that potentially pushes brakes a little bit. It's got some unique hard stopping zones. But yeah, I mean, if they were quite dejected after last week's race, and so I would say they're beyond thrilled to walk away here with some points. Could have been double points, like we mentioned earlier. So you got to be happy with that, despite the gremlins with the reliability side of things. You mentioned Esteban Ocon. We talked about him earlier with Fernando Alonso. Obviously, lost a chunk of time. We'll never know. Only only the racing gods will know where they could have ended up without kind of those shenanigans back and forth. But yeah, he did manage to clip Norris there right at the end. So good hard battle between two. P5 on the other side of Mercedes grid, George Russell. He said overall good weekend for a not great car. He mentioned the car is really lacking downforce. And obviously they're still becoming, even though better, they still cannot master the ride height issue like the other teams have, like especially Red Bull and Ferrari seem to have. So again, he mentioned that he was exhausted between the car being uncomfortable to drive and the porpoising issues and everything else. It was absolutely wore out. But to have the GOAT on one side of the grid, qualifying P16, and you're way up there, that shows that there is some good pace. Granted, last weekend there was about a second a lap between the two. Lewis definitely had the advantage last week, but we'll see how it all shakes out in Australia. Hopefully these guys can work together, keep a good relationship, and continue to build forward and have good communication to build that car out. P4, last of our guys before we get to the podium finishers. Checo Perez, man, I
could not have
feel
ordered
bad for
worse
this guy.
timing. You really could not have ordered worse timing.
Yeah,
it's Latifi again.
Yeah, yeah. I'm still a little sore from Abu Dhabi. I'm not gonna lie, but absolutely screwed. He did a phenomenal job in the first section of this race. Controlled the start, got out within the first 2 laps, had already built a DRS, buffer there, and was really controlling the pace from up front. He looked fast. He looked comfortable. The car looked great. And then absolutely screwed, like we mentioned earlier. First, the VSC comes out. He loses 1 spot there. And then the safety car comes out, allowing him to get clipped by Sainz.
It was interesting because it looked like Red Bull were reacting to the team radio of Ferrari saying box to overtake.
Yeah.
And then they brought Perez in. Was that them, scouting the team radio a little bit too much and thinking, hey, this is going to happen? And then Ferrari just said, you'll just do the opposite of what you do. So it's weird as the leader that you felt that you had to cover in that situation. I would have let Ferrari roll the dice and try the undercut, unless they really must have thought the undercut was super powerful here.
Well, and as fast as their straight line pace was at the Red Bull, yeah, it definitely bit them, getting a little happy on the radio. I agree. The undercut, I think, would have been, certainly would have been powerful. We were talking about before it happened. I'm like, yeah, this is a track where Ferrari would be a great opportunity for them to try something here. They did the old run out there, and which is it's a gray area there. I had someone ask me isn't that illegal? And I'm like, technically yes, but I don't think I've ever in my entire life seen the team get penalized for that. I don't know,
unless you do it multiple times.
Okay, yeah,
you're pretty much going to get given one, and they were out, and then they came back in, and you can make that call relatively quickly. And pretty much give it away and get away with it. If you do that multiple times, then you're going to get a reputation, and then you're going to get called on it.
And honestly, if it's a situation where it's all right, we're going to do the opposite, you got to have your guys out there because you don't know.
Correct.
If he pits, you stay out. If he doesn't, which is what happened. If he doesn't, then they very well may have come in that lap. And they could have completely shaken the rest of the order up with Latifi's incident. So I did want to ask you, Andy, and I mentioned this earlier about hope that he gets a chance to kind of fight his own fight this year. What did you think about the timing of when they gave the position back to Sainz and kind of that team's policing, self-policing, and because it was very clear on the broadcast that Sainz beat him to the safety car line. And they should have had that P3 spot. Sainz, I don't know how Sainz knew it, honestly, but he was very confident. I don't know how he could have seen it, but he was spot on correct because I went back and rewind it, and he was spot on. He had at least a car to half car to a car length ahead of Perez at the safety car line. But what do you think about that timing? It's like one of those deals where it would have been better for the FIA and the stewards to kind of have the switch beforehand, so that way Sainz could have potentially pressured Max, but at the same time, it's almost like Red Bull did that strategically to not allow, Sainz to be on Max's ass. And I almost feel like he was a sacrificial lamb again for Max in that situation.
I don't know that was, that's an interesting angle. I hadn't thought of it from that perspective. I just figured Red Bull didn't want it to get referred and was just kind of covering because they weren't necessarily sure. But I would have preferred that be all handled by the FIA at that point, because that's a line call. That's in or out, fair or foul. You're ahead, you're not ahead. That shouldn't be something that should be self-policed by the teams. That should be an FIA call to say, no. Car 55 is in front of car 11 here, and that's how you're going to line up at the restart. And if not, we're referring it.
Yeah.
You don't have to do negotiation. You don't have to make a big deal about it. But that's when you get on the horn, not broadcast it, obviously, and tell the team this is where you need to have your car.
Yeah, this isn't a situation where you got to look at telemetry and you got to try to figure out intent. Did he turn the wheel? Did he not turn the wheel? Did he purposely brake late? It's not one of those crazy situations where you really got to dive into it. When I, as a viewer, can hit rewind and within about 3 or 4 seconds figure out, 100% Sainz is ahead. Clearly, the FIA can too, and that, you're right. If it should have been a slam dunk, change it, and it would have been. I think honestly, would have worked out better for both drivers. It would have given Sainz an opportunity to get on Verstappen, But it also would have gotten Checo with his straight line speed the opportunity to get up on site. So all around, I think he was kind of screwed by that entire situation, unfortunately. So you hate it. It's a nice guy. Love to see his pole, but definitely hate it, to see him kind of get screwed there. So let's move into the podium. P3, Carlos Sainz, another very, very strong weekend for both Ferraris, P2 and P3. I was gonna clearly Ferrari didn't have a gentleman's agreement in place for the start, which maybe they should have. I don't know. Maybe it's too early in this part of the year. I don't know for when they start doing kind of things like that. I know the Ferrari's done that in the past, and it hasn't always worked out well when they've done it. But maybe this is a situation they should have planned ahead because Sainz attacked Leclerc. Leclerc defended, which checked up Sainz, and then Max just pounced on him. You can't give Max Verstappen the inside, especially not at this racetrack or really any racetrack for that matter, and was able to grab P3 right off the start. But what do you think of Checo's day all in all?
Well, I thought for Sainz it was an incredibly strong race. I still don't think we've tapped the potential of what he can really do with that car yet. I still think he's kind of learning it. Still, every now and again, just some niggly issues here and there. His sessions aren't as clean as Leclerc's are. But once I think he gets that sorted, oh man, look out. Because again, like we said this last week, if P2 was a bad weekend for him and he's P2 and here it's P3 and it's still not necessarily a perfect weekend, what's going to happen when everything really gets hooked up for him? Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would put in some sort of an agreement yet. If you're Mattia Binotto, I don't want to try to get into the head or the curly hair of one Mattia Binotto, but in terms of just it looked like they raced each other at least clean. They did not touch each other. He didn't wreck his teammate or anything like that. So I think Ferrari as a whole, they are miles in front in the constructors now because two back-to-back podiums, two double podiums back-to-back has set them up really well. The only thing that I think is going to curtail this is if Sainz and Leclerc start fighting each other more consistently. Haven't seen it yet, but it looks like it's going to start to be brewing, I would bet, if they continue to have the success that they are.
Yeah, no, and now we have another short clip from Vincenzo, being our resident Ferrari fan in the house this week since James is out, about Charles and Carlos Sainz that we can kind of cue up now. But it was at this track last year, which is obviously much later in the season last year when we went here, where those two kind of had it, went toe to toe with each other, and you started wondering, okay, they're both fast. Are they going to start showing up? Are they going to start? Is this going to start turning into something that obviously chilled out over the offseason and they're all happy again? Only time will tell. I still think Sainz is going to start challenging Leclerc, like you're mentioning. Once he figures out this car, you might see. Hopefully, we could see a 3 or 4 way battle for that top spot. So, and if you got that queued up, we'll go ahead and play that, and then we'll move into our final two.
Yeah, I think we had an absolute treat today in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia for this race, and it's only the second race of the season, and we've already had 2 Max Verstappen versus Charles Leclerc battles. Max won, Charles won. Awesome. Red Bull, Ferrari, just a battle I think that's going to happen all year long. It excites me obviously as a Ferrari fan, but it excites me as an F1 fan as well because we get 2 of the sport's very best, youngest stars going head to head, and they proved why they are kind of the cream of the crop for those young guys. And that battle, there's a montage that I kind of tweeted out a little bit earlier of Charles and Max going back and forth on lap 42, then 43, then 47, and last week Charles got the best of him of Max, and this week Max got the best of Charles, and I think we're gonna go back and forth all year on that. But what they're getting out of these cars is just insane. The 2 of these guys are just racing at the absolute limit, lap in and lap out. It's fun to watch. It's a lot of fun to watch. I think Charles right now is getting more than Sainz out of the car, and it's evident that he's at the absolute limit. Doesn't seem like Sainz is at the absolute limit, but he's driving really, really well. Another, he got they got 1-2 last week, and this week they get 2-3. I think Sainz is right there. He seems to be very consistent with the car. Not sure if there's a different setup going on between the two of them, but again, I think Charles is just the better driver of the two anyway. Not to take anything from Sainz, but over the course of this season, Charles with finding a good car underneath him is going to prove why he has been so highly regarded. Carlos is no slouch. I just think Charles is the better racer, and that's taking nothing away from Carlos. Would love to see if they start making a few more adjustments in each direction. Testing out different setups on the cars. I think as Carlos gets a little more comfortable in the car, will he push back and want different setups? Will that make a difference? Who knows? We'll see. But that'll be a fun battle to watch as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. Again, you can find Vincenzo Landito at Vincenzo Landito on Twitter. He's also partnering. If you go to the F1guide.com, he's been partnering with a company down there to make some Formula One shirts. I've got one on order as well, so definitely check that out. They're pretty kick ass. I'm eagerly waiting in the mail for one of the shirts that I ordered to arrive. I'll definitely be rocking on the show. But really cool stuff. I know he's got some new designs coming out as well, so definitely check that out for sure. But yeah, I mean, going on to Charles and Max now. I mean, just obviously Charles looked incredibly fast once he got the lead after the safety car situation. Especially sector 1 was just phenomenal. And Max, and at one point they came on to Max's radio and said, he's got all his space in sector 1. Just let's hold tight. Let's let him kind of chew through his tires and let's see what happens. The battle between two, like you mentioned, Andy, so far this year has been about move and counter move. And some of that I think certainly has to do with this car and the ability to follow closely, and the fact that, you can't relax anymore because it doesn't look like on paper that you're going to be able to build out these 5, 10, 15, second leads like you have been in prior years. Sounds like a guy, if you're similar on pace, they're going to be able to stick with you because you're not just chewing up tires, especially that second place guy. So it also doesn't hurt matters, I guess, in that regard, that we've had 2 tracks now where you have a DRS zone going into another DRS zone. This one, we saw it in Bahrain. Obviously, Max makes move immediately. Leclerc is able to fight right back. And then we saw this battle again today. We saw a little bit of this last year, with the infamous brake check, whatever came out of that. It's the same straightaway. Neither guy, once Max, was able to pull up there, neither guy was wanting to be leading going into that final straightaway with DRS. Before Max took a lead, I did want to get your thoughts on this. So I went back and watched this multiple times, and I know one of the questions that we had, I'm trying to find that. Glenn Moore asked, how did Max gain such an advantage during the VSC? And I was wondering that myself, and then when he mentioned that, I'm like, all right, I gotta investigate further. So I went back, and F1 TV didn't do me any favors just because the data screens are not as good as they were last year. They're not even showing the flags or anything, so I had to kind of sync up my video a little bit. But when the VSC actually hit, Max was 1.6 seconds behind Charles Leclerc. Now, within just a few seconds, it went from 1.6 to about 3.3. So they obviously got the radio message. Max got it quickly and slowed up immediately. VSC and Andy, I'll let you explain, kind of how that works in a second. But, we have such a reduction. It's all about the delta times. And, you can see guys speed up and then they slow down. They're trying to stay within that relative delta time that they're having to fit in there. But at the end of the VSC, Max went, again, 1.6 at the start, was 0.8 of a second behind Leclerc at the end of the VSC when they went green flag. So he gained 0.8 during the VSC sequence. Now, is that Max pushing the boundaries a little bit more? Is that Leclerc just happened to be kind of timing his sequence not right? Maybe he was up a little bit on his delta and had to slow down a little bit to stay within the green and just the timing sorted out. I don't know. But it definitely gained an advantage. And when you look at a race that's decided by half a second, that 0.8 of a second certainly makes a big difference because Max was not within the DRS window prior to the VSC. after the VSC, he was absolutely within DRS range, immediately started attacking, and obviously took the lead not too much later. But Andy, what's your thoughts kind of on that whole matter? It's hard to say, was one right or wrong, or who was up or who's down. We just don't know.
I think what you've illustrated through this is a bit of the myth of the virtual safety car. And the myth of the virtual safety car is that the gap that you had going into the thing is going to be the gap that you have coming out. And that is clearly not really been the case. And you've seen it a lot, I think, much more apparent in other lower forms of racing, like F2 and F3. I can think of specifically a Monaco F2 race where they were the only action on a Friday, and it was Memorial Day weekend, and I was off work, and I was like, oh, good, I get to watch the F2 feature race. And that was in that entire race. The dude who was leading, I forget the names, so don't at me about this, but the guy who was leading was going to sail to a comfortable victory, and then a VSC came out. And he ended up, the VSC ended right as he was coming out of the tunnel and going into that chicane there, and it was probably the heaviest braking zone. The other dude was just going into the tunnel. So when the VSC ends, one dude's going really slow, the other dude's going really fast, and it was like within like a lap or two, he had him. So that is the myth of the VSC. You're not going to get that. It is a delta. It is a fixed delta. They have to reduce their speed by 40%. So where you choose to deploy that 40% is on you, the driver, and you're getting a basically a red versus a green light on your steering wheel. And sometimes you're doing more tire warming, you're using more of your 40% versus if you're trying to cool things like cool brakes or cool air temperatures or engine temperatures, you're going to be losing less of that. So, and it's also random when the virtual safety car is ending, and you don't know that for sure. You're given a beep that it's coming, but you don't know when that thing ends. So if you want to gamble and conserve some of your 40% and hit it and think that you're going to hit that beep, you can take advantage of it. It does happen. It's one of the flaws, I think, of the virtual safety car system. And I don't particularly love the use of it because of exactly this type of scenario.
Yeah, I have to say I absolutely hate the VSC for this scenario and the cheap pit stop. I think the first time we ever saw it was Sebastian Vettel was at Australia. I think he managed to somehow jump LewisHamilton in the pit stop, went on to win that race.
Yep.
And we were all like, "Wait, what just happened?" And it's a factor. And like I said, it would have benefited Hamilton, would have benefited a couple of guys today. Had they been able to come in at that perfect time, because the fact that everyone's cruising around, down 40%, and suddenly I'm making up numbers here, but suddenly a 26-second delta to take a pit stop and not lose a position suddenly turns into about 12 or 13 seconds. So it's a huge thing, and I don't like it. So Glenn, to your question, absolutely, without a doubt, Max Verstappen gained an advantage during that VSC, but did he do that illegally? That we just don't know. And most likely, probably not.
If he did, the stewards would have gotten involved.
Yeah, probably not.
That is a easy call if you violate VSC rules.
Yeah, most likely what probably transpired is that Max was saving a little bit of his 40, and Leclerc was up a little bit on his 40, and had to kind of check up to make sure, oh shit, it's ending. I got to slow down just a smidge. If Max already has a little bit of buffer in there, next thing you know, it doesn't take much to get 0.8 of a second. We're talking about the blink of an eye here. So yeah, did he gain advantage? Absolutely. Was it within rules? Probably, likely. But again, I despise the VSC with a passion. Just throw the damn safety car. Let me see the pretty, Mercedes car, in its glimmer. Let me hear the V8s running around or whatever the hell it is. I'm fine with that. So I'd rather neutralize it and make it all as fair as square. So that's a painful one. But again, between the two racing, I thought it was phenomenal. Nobody wanted to lead in that last sector, but I will say another thing, going back to pace. There was 1 second or one part of the race here where Max gained half a second in one of the short DRS straights behind Leclerc. Once he got into it, it blew my mind that he went from 0.8 something down to 0.3 something in one freaking straightaway. That just shows you the power of the DRS and just how quick that Red Bull was in the straight line for sure.
Well, and the other thing, I thought this battle was fascinating on multiple levels. One, the differences in the car and where one car was stronger versus the other is just a technical thing that you can kind of go to town with. But the other part that I thought was even better was you were watching in real time both Leclerc and Verstappen recalibrate their racing brains in real time. You saw Verstappen, in Bahrain, thought he made the move, thought the move was done. Oh, here comes Charles. He takes him back. Max didn't really have a response to that. Well, here, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, not going to happen again, because Leclerc pulled that turn 27 DRS move on him, and Max was ready for it the second time. As you saw, they both tried to do it with the dummy. They both tried to sell each other the dummy, and it didn't work. But, I mean, you're watching both these guys play in this arena, and it was just so quickly how you saw the racing calculus change. And we're only in race 2. Imagine what this is going to be by the end of the season. This is going to get good. It's already great. It's going to get even better.
Yeah. We're talking about 200-mile-an-hour chess match basically going on lap after lap. It's interesting. Last year, Red Bull took the approach on setup that they wanted to be quick in the twisty bits of this track. And they ended up losing that race. Mercedes went with the straight line speed and they won that race. And this year, Red Bull did the opposite. They chose straight line speed over the twisty bits and won the race. So, perhaps they're on to something. Perhaps that's the way that a team has to go. Because if you're going to have DRS, especially at this track, and have 3 of them, which I feel like, I feel like 3 might be too much. I feel like that middle one maybe needs to go away, to be perfectly honest with you, just because of the weird shenanigans that it causes with the chess match, things like that. But it's just so damn powerful as well. And yeah, clearly teams are going to, we saw in Bahrain the DRS was powerful. Definitely saw it today if you have the right setup. So, but Max made a hell of a good move. Again, he set him up and perfectly on that last time. And once he got the lead, unfortunately, Charles just didn't have an answer for him. Max was just too damn fast. He was fast enough in the twisty bits to stay ahead. And then he was just too damn fast on the straightaways for the Ferrari to have any chance to fight back. So, right now it's all cordial between the two. They're all having a good time and high-fiving. It reminds me of early 2021, between Max and Lewis.
It's early. It's still very early.
Yes.
And they haven't crossed each other yet.
Yeah, let's wait till there's some contact, and let's see how they come out with this. We'll see how their relationship is come mid-season. But at some point, there's going to be some contact between the two of them. It's just bound to happen. It's racing. In every single era of F1, there's always been usually 2 top guys, and those 2 top guys are going to hit each other at some point in time. So it'll be very curious to see. Granted, these guys are similar ages, and obviously have the backgrounds, things like that. But it'll be very interesting to see just how that relationship brews as time goes on, and as things really ramp up. Right now, it's all about having a good time, and that was a fun race, whether I won or lost. But when the championship starts coming down the line and things like that, let's see how it goes. But either way, we're in for a hell of a good race, and hopefully we get Checo and Carlos in the mix as well. So, Andy, let's take one last quick break, and we'll get into our standing recaps and fan emails, and then we'll close it out for tonight. All right, welcome back. All right, so we just talked about the podium finishers. Let's get into the standings. On the driver's side, you have in P1, Charles Leclerc with 45 points. P2 is Sainz with 33. Verstappen in P3 with 25. Russell, P4, wow, 22 points ahead of his teammate, the GOAT, Lewis Hamilton, in P5 with 16. Esteban Ocon's P6. Perez, P7. K-Mag, P8. Valtteri Bottas, P9. And P10, Lando Norris in the top 10. There you go.
Hey, look at that.
On the team side of things, Ferrari, like you mentioned earlier, has a monster lead, at least at the moment, 40-point lead up on Mercedes of all teams. Hard to expect to see that even after 2 races. Red Bull in just 1 point behind Mercedes in P3, Alpine P4, Haas P5. Love seeing that. Alfa Romeo P6, Alpha Tauri P7, McLaren still P8, right where I predicted them. Hopefully, for all our sakes, I'm wrong in the grand scheme of things. P9, Aston Martin. Oh, that's a painful one. And also with 0 points, P10, Williams. Andy, so we had some fan emails tonight. You want to read these, or you want me to do them?
I will do my best to try to get through these.
Andy's not feeling so hot tonight, but I'll jump in if I need
to. Rachel Fleming has asked, personally, after this weekend, she did not enjoy this race at all after the safety aspects came into question. Is it right for F1 fans to question how certain tracks pass safety checks for racing? I think that's a fair point. I did do some research into it. There's a myriad of technical specifications that lead you to getting an FIA Grade 1 cert. None of them actually involve money under the table, as far as I know. But you do look at this track and you do wonder if some of it is a little suspect. They made some modifications. Turn 27 was widened. There were other aspects that were made, to make it a bit easier so you could see some cars. Didn't have as many blind corners, but this track just in general it's a one-off, and it's unique, and therefore the danger level, I think, is just that much higher. Given new cars, new regulations, and a vertical learning curve, I think that's why you saw some of the safety aspects come into play this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This is it's an interesting process. This track, especially as an example, remember they received their safety rating before they even broke ground on this track, or shortly thereafter. I mean, we were nowhere remotely close to this track being finished before we received the safety rating. How you get that, I don't know. Again, I'm not as smart as other people. And there's powers to be, and there's data and telemetry and yada yada measurements, and who knows what all goes into it exactly. But it is interesting, yes. And I will say this is a very dangerous track that once again bit someone. We talked about K-Mag, Ocon and Fernando Alonso both also had similar near misses at that same corner. Ocon had a really big one, got all kinds of slideways, and managed to save that, thankfully. But yeah, if we're going back here next year, which Andy and I think unfortunately we probably will be, there might need to be some additional adjustments, especially coming out of that corner as well. Because at this track, I would just say it's safe to assume you could hit anything in this track. So, chalk it up for that one, unfortunately.
All right. She actually sent a second question, and she also said, also, how on earth did Alfa Romeo mess up a 5-second penalty for Zhao? I thought it would be extremely simple to do. Wait 5 seconds before changing the tires. Zhao would have comfortably gotten points without the drive-through penalties. Yes, completely agree. It turns out, I mean, if you want to blame anybody, blame the jack man. He touched the car. Everybody else tried not to touch the car. I mean, I saw the onboard. The onboard was facing forward, so it wasn't the best shot, but the tire people definitely did the right thing. It just kind of sucks because I think you're right. He probably gets in the points without that. Jenny Donahue, frequent contributor to the show, she chimes in and says, these cars retiring, so many just shutting down, engine fail, fuel pumps, etc. Hoping this is not a trend for the season and the kinks get worked out. My take on that would be we're in a vertical learning curve. We've only had 2 real data points and some really actually, I think, extreme weather. I think it's been a lot warmer than a lot of these cars I think are designed necessarily to run into. But we're going to come into the calendar. So I do think reliability will come with time as, we get more used to how these cars are actually going to function and how they work. And, we really only had 6 days of testing. That's probably really not enough for such a revolutionary new way of doing things. So, but it also leads to some random results and some other players being in the mix. So it's good and it's bad. It's kind of a double-edged sword as far as I see it.
Yeah, and as much as it is now, it's still nothing remotely close to 2014 when we went to the hybrid
Correct.
Engine. There were cars pulling up left and right.
And 5 cars didn't make the first race on the recon laps.
Yeah, so it could be much worse. But yeah, I agree. It was such a drastic change. I'm actually surprised it's not more. Even my prop bet for last week, I predicted a chunk of DNFs, and I thought most of it would be reliability issues. So I'm surprised, honestly, that we don't have as many as we do. They'll work it out. But yeah, you're learning on the fly. And reliability is one of the things, it's a Formula Series. It's not a spec series. So you got to add reliability just like you're pushing for speed and aero and downforce and everything else. Reliability is also its own department, and it's got to be, a crucial part of your plans and where you're spending your money as well. So,
yep. So Jennifer, who is at Jennifer B926, she chimed in and said, "I don't like this track at all." Her son disagrees and says it's one of the best tracks in F1. I was really entertained by Fernando and Esteban going at it and can't wait to see if they show it on Drive to Survive. Don't ever assume Drive to Survive is going to show something you're sure of, because when they neglect to show Fernando versus Lewis Hamilton in Hungary, and that was 10 minutes of some of the best wheel-to-wheel racing I've ever seen, anything is up for grabs with those guys. So I hope they actually do, but we don't know, and we'll find out next March, I guess. In terms of this track, I can see why you don't necessarily like it. We've talked about some of the perilous nature of it. But I'm with you, John, on this, where if you packed it up and took it somewhere else and plopped it down, on the coast of California, hell, I'd buy a freaking ticket and go see it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's such a one-off. It's such a unique design. It's such a unique challenge, and you get to see all these teams attack it in different ways. So I find this track fascinating. I hate it. I hate where it is, but I find it fascinating at the same time.
Yeah, when we went to Azerbaijan the first time, we all was like, "Oh, this track is dangerous as shit, and it's going to produce terrible racing. And why are we going through this very small castle section and everything else?" And it's turned out to be a phenomenal track. So again, another part of the world that doesn't always have the best track record with things going on. Be nice if you could pick it up and move it somewhere else. But yeah, as a track, if we're looking purely at the track and not anything else, it actually is a pretty damn exciting track, and it presents a challenge. You don't want anyone getting hurt, obviously, but it's racing. You still, you want some of that danger. You want to incentivize those that are willing to push to be rewarded by that. So it's kind of old school in its nature, lots of walls and things like that. No room for mistake. And you get to see, I would absolutely love to see a Formula One car going through that final sector, 200 miles an hour, dancing left, right. That would be heaven for me. So, maybe in another circuit, but it's, as a whole, I will take this track. Just don't like everything that comes with it, unfortunately.
Yeah. So Dave Doherty chimed in and asked thoughts on Leclerc. I think we pretty much kind of talked about Leclerc. Like I said before, I thought it's great to see the real time calculus, the racing calculus and the racecraft changing and evolving right in front of your eyes. So I think he's in for a championship run. As long as the Ferrari car looks to be able to do what they want to do with it, he's in a prime spot to challenge for a WDC this year. So Jonathan Scott chimed in as well and said, "Where do we see the midfield?" And he has Haas, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri, and then McLaren in the current. That's his current order. John, what's your thoughts on that?
That's tough. After, I would probably put, at this exact moment in time, I would probably put maybe AlphaTauri first, Alpine second, Haas third, and then to be kind of flip a coin for AlphaTauri and McLaren. I think both of them have loads of potential and will be fast, and we'll probably, we haven't seen the best of either of those cars yet. But at the moment, I know they don't, based on points, they don't necessarily have it because of bad luck. But AlphaTauri, I feel like is the car to beat if you're in the midfield right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, the Honda powered cars are definitely quick. Do they stay together? I think is the only question. So I don't mind that as a ranking. I don't know that I see Haas quite up there. I do think you've got. I would go with I would flip Alfa Romeo and Haas because I think Alfa Romeo is probably a little bit more developed right now. AlphaTauri definitely very strong, probably right after that. Then Alpine. Alpine is probably in its own little time zone right now, and it's just a question of, do they go a little bit forward and can race better, or do they fall a little bit behind? I do see McLaren right now kind of on the back foot still. They like I said before, they definitely have work to do to get that car righted. All right, and our last question comes from the Formula, and his question was, Lewis appeared to question his team's effort at the end of the race in a post-race interview saying, quote, "I gave it everything, but I'm not sure my team did. Is trouble brewing in paradise?"
As someone who's watched Lewis's career from day one, I don't think trouble's brewing. I think Lewis, and especially Lewis and Toto, have that relationship where I think they're honest with each other and can have those conversations. Again, when you go back and watch the qualifying lap and you don't see any real mistakes by Lewis, but he's P16, we got issues here. Kind of the same thing. We're not in the same shape that we were last year. We were in trouble at the start of last year, and obviously had to do a huge recovery drive to get that championship. But Lewis challenged them throughout the way as well. I think Lewis and George are going to continue to race phenomenally this year. The team is clearly missed on the setup. The no pod setup and the porpoising issues, things like that. They clearly are off, and maybe this is part of the sliding scale working as F1 intended. Lewis, or Mercedes won the championship again, therefore they get the least amount of wind tunnel and development time as anyone else. So in that regard, Red Bull and Ferrari, which are right there in the mix, are doing quite well. But you're going to have teams that are going to miss it when you have a big one. Unfortunately, if you're a Mercedes fan, they missed it this year. So will they improve? Yes, absolutely. But I think Lewis is just kind of challenging the team to continue to push because I know he's not going to be happy with being a midfield team. It's not what he signed up to be, and he's got too much talent. And frankly, so does Russell, for that matter. So no, I don't think anything's brewing yet. They've been through hard times before, and I think Lewis knows that this is just going to be one of those years that they're just going to have to continue to push and see what comes on. And Lewis loves a challenge. So, I mean, a few years ago, he saw about going to Ferrari, remember, in the helm of their stink fest. So, I think he's up for the challenge for sure. And I don't think there's anything going there yet. So,
no, I think and I tend to agree with you, John. I don't know that they're not busting at the seams. This isn't a team in total turmoil or anything like that. If you start seeing them screw up pit stops or make obvious, kind of bad calls, that's when this stuff tends to start the dominoes start to go down, and you're really kind of getting into the abyss there. They're not there yet. They're not anywhere close to that. They are probably closer to coming out of it than they probably realize. It's just a question of they haven't had the time since the season started, and we've had back-to-back races to really, really sit down and try to address it. So what can they do in 2 weeks? Well, maybe something, but the schedule doesn't give you any chance to really do that until, either the U.S. race in Miami or until everybody gets to Spain. And that's when we may see our first big reset of kind of what the running order kind of really is. The other thing, it kind of struck me like I think Lewis was feeling like all of the McLaren fans felt last week. When you realize you're not as good as you necessarily thought you were. I came into this season thinking, we're going to be right on the heels of Mercedes, trying to get in for podium situations, and it was just made apparent with a giant thud in Bahrain that that's not the case. So I don't blame him for some body language or types of things, but he's still saying the right things. And he's still trying to show as much as he can on track.
Yeah, and everything that they're saying, everything Toto's saying and Russell's saying is that, yes, we have serious issues and we're not bluffing this time. If you haven't believed us yet, you should be. We're not bluffing. But they all keep saying that they know there's tons of potential in this car. So I think once they figure out the slow speed corners and porpoising issues, if they get that ride height, even if they get the ride height alone figured out, that car is going to be so much faster than it is now. If you want to see Lewis Hamilton pissed off about something, go back and watch Monaco last year when they pitted him first. Then if you want to see a pissed off Hamilton at his team, go watch that one, and you can compare the body language difference between that night and this night for sure. So, all right, appreciate everyone. Again, after every race, we love getting your comments and questions. So definitely continue to send them in, and certainly if you have topics you want us to cover during the off weeks or preview episodes, we're happy to do so as well. So keep sending them in. We love them. Let's move on to our weekly awards. We'll be quick about these. Weekly Rubbish Award. I know James has got watching replays instead of awesome battles for first. I agree. I know Deanna made a comment on her Twitter as well. We saw a ton of replays. definitely maybe saw more replays than we did action today. So I agree with you on that one. Andy, what was yours overall?
Oh, this will probably be my last time where I'm going to get wordy with anything, but mine is Saudi Arabia. What are we doing? Oh my gosh! From an attack on Friday to the weird messaging to a story about a marshal who had to resign because he didn't know how Twitter works. It made this weekend feel so heavy. From last year where we thought this was actually what our thought going into the race. It's not playing. Oh, dang it. Stupid thing. I had a whole sound thing all
Never
set
plays
up.
when we want it to. It's stupid.
Yeah, I know. It played the other ones.
That's technology.
Anyway, where we didn't know if the track was going to be done, it just made this whole weekend feel so much more heavy, and I didn't want anything more to do with it. So for Saudi Arabia, just the whole thing into the bin with you.
Yeah, and if you don't know about the marshal thing, you can Google it. But essentially, one of the marshals tweeted that they hope that LewisHamilton has a spectacular wreck, Romain Grosjean fiery mess type situation.
And the guy's a fire marshal.
Yeah, probably, in the world of racing, probably the worst that I've ever seen. And I've seen some bad stuff that people have said over the last 3 decades. So pretty disgusting. I don't know the vetting process for marshals, but, I hope that security is one of those that are, heavily vetted because, you got marshals have a lot of access to a lot of places. I guess all it would take was, one of them to go rogue, but pretty despicable there, unfortunately. For my rubbish, I don't know. It's the weekend aside. I kind of agree with all you guys in the other part. I didn't particularly like seeing the 3 Red Bull fans about 9 times over. I'm like, are those the only 3 Red Bull fans in the whole place? Because that's the only 3 we're getting to see here. But overall, just the weekend as a whole, I'm just glad to be over. It just from K-Mag, I just had weird vibes going into this weekend. And then obviously Friday happened, and then I felt really bad. And then, I even told my significant other, I'm like, I just hope that nothing else happens this weekend. And then bam, we got K-Mag. I'm like, oh God, or not K-Mag, Schumacher, sorry. And I'm like, please just no more. So I'm glad we got out, relatively unscathed here, but it just gives me the creeps here coming back here. Moving on to analysis paralysis. James says Alpine too much time before team orders allowed both K-Mag and Bottas to get back in the fight. I completely agree with you. Ottmeyer needs to step in. I know Ian, it's you got to play nice with Fernando, but I think Fernando in this situation would have been happy for team orders to be applied for him to move on, because I think he was definitely the fastest driver and was in that situation at least pushing Ocon. So, Andy, what was yours?
I will agree with James wholeheartedly on that. It was like 3 laps too long. You need to have the schoolmaster out there a lot quicker saying, guys, knock it off. We're losing here.
Yeah. Dark horse of the day. Andy, who do you have on this one?
I'm going to give this one to Esteban Ocon, who made that really nice counter move on Lando Norris that no one got a chance really to see. It was, at least they panned to it after the race ended and we got to see the thing on the line. But those two went at it for about 4 laps at the end. Now, granted, there was a fight at the front. I get why we didn't see it, but it was just, you're seeing these exact same moves and counter moves, not only at the front, but throughout the grid as well.
Yeah. James has George Russell says anytime you're beating your teammate is good, but anytime you're beating your teammate is Lewis Hamilton, that's a great accomplishment. I agree with you. Lewis Hamilton doesn't get beat too often. Again, if the VSC works out well, he may not have gotten beat today, but that's racing for you. So bad weekend. It'll be interesting to see how they recover and move forward. But yeah, I would agree. It's sad to see Mercedes being a dark horse, because that's usually a team that we, put for teams that don't have a chance of winning. And unfortunately, that's Mercedes this year, at least at the moment. So I agree with you on that one. And then driver of the day, James, probably painful for this one for him to say it, but had to give it to Verstappen. He said hung around in striking distance and then got the move done after some nice on-track battling. He said, give me more and more of that, please. I agree with you guys. I think Leclerc had a phenomenal race as well. I think you could really flip it to either one of these guys. If you don't have that VSC at the end, I think this is Leclerc's race to win for sure. So it's hard to follow anyone. I'll kind of split the middle down the end. Andy, where are you at?
I'm in for Max on this one. I think just because he was able to change his race calculus kind of in real time, like you saw. I mean, Croft even said, on the broadcast, do we have patience now in Max Verstappen's vernacular? Well, apparently so. He learned it really quick, and that's what enabled him to take the win today.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so moving on to our predictions real fast. We'll just kind of breeze through these. Deanna, her best weekend yet. Coming back.
Sweeping the podium definitely helps your score.
Yeah, swept the podium and got to drive, or fastest lap driver. 4 points for her. James with 3 points. Myself with 2, and Andy with 1. It really shakes up the order here after 2 races. We've got Deanna in P1 now. Wow, what a turnaround. Last to P1 and won the weekend. James with P5, myself with P5, and Andy with P4. So it's all to play for. 2 races in, but a strong showing from Mrs. Relap to herself, doing quite well. It's a good time for sure for her. Andy, any final thoughts, or you want to close this out?
Well, we get our first week off, which I think if you've been listening to us all the way to the end, at least me getting through it, I probably need. But we're going to go back to Melbourne, and it's going to be some interesting times to watch the race and a fun place to go. I think the atmosphere is going to be amazing. So I'm looking forward to that. I am looking forward to finally see what this new layout actually looks like. So, loving the fact that we've got 2 really fun races. So yeah, this is working out very well. We will be back not next weekend, but the week after with our preview on Wednesday. We'll do our same bit of recapping all of the fun from the Melbourne weekend. So for John, for James and Deanna, who aren't here, it's been also, in spite of myself, it's been really fun to do. But as always, may all your laps be fast.